Hey, Composing Gloves here, and today we're going to be talking about scale degrees. We're going to be talking about them and the various ways we have to look at scale degrees. Each one offers a different way of looking at the scale and harmonically analyzing something. It's very useful. You'll hear these terms tossed around all the time, and so it's really important to be familiar with the different ways they can appear and why you would use one versus another. So now that we've covered minor and major scales, we're in a position to understand a lot more of the nuances between these. Again, intervals will come in big handy from here on out. They've already come in big handy as you've been going, but they begin to take on a more and more important role as far as you'll be using them a lot, maybe without realizing it. So here I have a C major scale, a C minor scale, and then two more C major scales. And so the first system is, here we have the C major scale, and each scale note is assigned a name, and it's relative to the scale. So the first note in the scale, and here we're talking about major scales, is the tonic. And then we have the supertonic, the mediant, the subdominant, dominant, submediant, and leading tone. And you will hear these terms tossed around. The most common ones you'll hear are the leading tone, the dominant, and the tonic. And the reason is these are the most important tones in a major key, especially for tonal writing. We could get into other weird stuff, but we're just doing tonal writing. So the tonic is the name for the first note. We notice here that there are pieces of names in other names. So for example, tonic, and then we have supertonic. And it's because of the relationship that's formed with the tonic. So if we just listen, that's a whole step, and you're going to hear this sort of a relationship when ascending referred to this way. It's a little bit of a weird name, but the important one is the dominant. So tonic is like the most important note. That's the most important note. The second most important note is ironically not the supertonic. It's a little weird that way. It's actually the dominant. It's the fifth. And you can think of it like it dominates the key. And if you were to look at a good example, I have this open. This is an exercise we'll be doing later. But Beethoven's Für Elise has that part that goes da 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 da, and then they got to pull back. It's this part right here. So that do 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 is all on. We have the E right before we pull back into this sort of this minor second deal going on over here. And the way he uses the fifth, that E, is what creates such a powerful transition. The dominant will always call to the tonic. And so if we look at like a 1-5, so here's the 1, here's the 5. But when someone says they're referring to the dominant, they're referring to the quality of the dominant, the quality that the dominant has to pull towards the tonic. And so if we were to play like a C major scale and then play a 5, the strongest place you can go in the C major scale after a 5 is the tonic. And we also notice we have the subdominant. Now, this is a perfect fourth, and this is if you're going to go anywhere else, the subdominant would be the next place you could go. That would be the next most powerful position in the scale. It's the reason why the 1-4-5 works out so well, the chord progression. Or you could do 1-5-4 because they're all so present in that scale already. And so there's a lot of things we'll get into called cadences that we're going to be leveraging a lot of these relationships. And the leading tone is so important because it is found in the dominant chord. And it's like a whole deal. I'll talk about the leading tone in a second. But anyways, the subdominant is called the subdominant because it relates to the dominant by this level of importance in the key. Now we have these ones called the mediant and the submediant. These are your major 6 and major third, your third and your sixth interval in the scale. And these exist, if you think about it, the 3 and the 6, thirds are tonal intervals. They're not perfect, but as in like perfect intervals, but they're tonal intervals that sound very consonant. And they share a very similar relationship with their use in harmony. So people will often talk about the mediant or submediant according to these roles that they'll typically assume. And as we get into chords and eventually one day part writing, you'll like naturally just talk about these things. So the submediant is a little less used than the mediant. just because of its relationship to the tonic. If you're working in a minor key, you'll find things to be a little bit different somewhat. Not really. The minor key, because remember, this is the relative major in a minor key. We talked about that in previous videos. So the mediant will hold a higher position of standing than the submediant. It's just kind of weird because a lot of these things when I'm talking with people about it, you just talk about them. You don't talk about oh, what does it mean to be the mediant? You just refer to that role like, oh, that's like, when the mediant does such and such. So that's what's going on there. And then finally, we have the leading tone. And you notice here, this is our only difference between the two keys, the minor and the major keys. There could be a lot of differences. We could get into like other scales and things, and you could talk about tunings that arguably define a lot of these relationships that are found in tonal harmony. But that's like way advanced stuff. And it honestly, like, if you have a grip on that stuff, you have other things to worry about. So this leading tone I wouldn't give it a rank in level of importance. What its role is the function it serves. It will always pull to the tonic, and it's pretty much relatable to the dominant. It's about on equal terms. If you're going to go somewhere tonal, the dominant's the place to go. If you're going to go somewhere that's a little more dissonant, from a judgmental standpoint, it's going to pull to the one with the same amount of power as the dominant, depending on how you use it. The leading tone is often used in the context, it's not often used. It's used in the context of chords, not as the chord itself. So not as the 7. So we know this is the 7th scale degree, but they will refer to the leading tone often. Wow, my voice, that was weird. They'll refer to the leading tone based on the way it interacts with the dominant and a lot of the time. And you'll see that's the most common way you'll see it used as you go up in theory. And then you'll get into more and more unusual ways of using these different tones, and things get a lot more complicated when we go chromatic. So if we just like play that C major scale and we just stop, it has a clear disposition. It wants to go up. It wants to go there. It doesn't want to go. That's much weaker. It's not nearly as satisfying as. And if we were to go to just the dominant, for example, it's a very comfortable stopping point. That's why the dominant's so powerful. If we were to go to like the mediant, it's comfortable, but it's not nearly as comfortable as the 5. And the 5 wants to pull to the 1. It doesn't want to do something like this. That's not very comfortable, but it would love to do that. It wants to go back to the 1, the tonic. And so that's sort of the naming scheme behind these. Now, this half-step relationship is a relationship that you'll just see called the leading tone sometimes, even if it's not in the context of the key. So it sort of holds this relationship with a half-step. So we use the term subtonic for the natural minor scale, because the harmonic minor and the melodic minor have that on the ascending anyways. It has the raised 7th. So it's still a leading tone. But in the natural minor, it doesn't. It's a whole step away. So this would be called the subtonic, similar to the same setup as the supertonic over here. Only now it's sub because it's below. I don't know. You got me there. So that's just something you should be aware of. If you can see here, I actually have been working on a test, trying to make a comprehensive test, because this is actually an excellent idea. I wish I had done stuff like this earlier. But there will actually be a test. That way you can see if you're ready to move on to the next stuff. And it will be just like tests you will receive in college. I'm not a fan of the multiple choice tests either, because those are just bullcrap. Okay, so let's move over to the next method. So that's the names of the different scale degrees. So we're going to go down to the bottom one. This is the next method. We'll talk about this one last, because this has some material we're going to talk about in the future. So we can use Arabic numbers. That's an important thing to remember. So we have Arabic numbering that we're able to use, and we've already gotten used to this. So people will use these sort of interchangeably. Again, the most important ones here are the tonic, dominant, and not subtonic, super tonic, dominant, and leading tone. Those are the big ones. If you don't remember the rest, just remember those, and perhaps the subdominant. But here we've got numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. It's very apparent if you're talking like, oh, we're moving in C, and then let's say that you're in a band, they're going to say play a 1, 4, 5 progression. They're actually probably referring to Roman numerals, but you'll see these sort of systems get mixed together in language, but written on paper, they're very different. This just refers to the role of a particular scale degree as it's functioning in terms of the key. So we have our scale, and if someone's talking about like, oh, the 5, and they'll say like flat 5 or raise lower 5, they'll say flat 5 to mean lower 5, or raise the 5th. Or whatever. They're going to be talking about it like this. It's usually towards a more harmonic standpoint. It's not towards a relationship that's going on within a chord or a key. We've been looking at everything right now in terms of scales and keys, and it's a really good habit to get into. But sometimes you'll have these like interchordal things that can be like a whole topic all on their own. So you just see numbers out there for that. So this refers to the role they have as a relationship, a harmonic relationship. This refers to a different aspect. Like if you're going to say play a 1, 3, 4, or listen to the 3, a lot of times they'll mean immediate. So these two share a lot of common ground. You'll see as it comes up in conversation, oh, they have these sort of different perspectives. And then we have finally, this is the most thorough, I guess. And so this is the Roman numeral system. So I hope you know Roman numerals. Uppercase means major, lowercase means minor. So we have 1, 2, 3, and then the symbol for 5 is this V, and it's uppercase. So right now this is a major, and the symbol for 4 is 5 minus 1. And anything to the left is a minus, anything to the right is a plus. So we see 6 is a plus, and this is minor. This is actually the formula for major scale diatonic chords, but we haven't talked about that yet. But the reason why Roman numerals are cool is Roman numerals allow you to express a chord that goes along with it. And we're going to be talking about figure bass as well. That always comes up, and I always get questions about this in tutoring. So we'll do a thorough covering of figure bass as well. But at this point, this is often combined with figure bass. Doesn't have to be per se. It pretty much has to be. But right now, the way you can look at it is it serves the same function as these numbers, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, only it also shows the associated qualities, chord qualities, major, minor, diminished, augmented, that go along with the key. And so you'll see these a lot more. Figure bass and Roman numeral analysis is excellent for analyzation purposes. So we'll be getting into that. Now, the way I typed in these is I just used the chord. I used the chord editor, Control K, to type these in. So that's how I did that, because they don't actually have a mode for this. Other places like Sibelius has a very sophisticated way of doing just about any sort of text you can imagine. So Sibelius is awesome that way. MuseScore, for a free thing, it's amazing. And you can find other ways of doing it, but they don't have a dedicated tool. They recently added figure bass with the version 2 of MuseScore. So that is what's going down. So that's scale degrees. I guess just a quick recap. These are relationships that refer to the key and the role they play together. These are sort of the same thing. They're a little more ambiguous and generally purposed. And then if you have like some other way of sort of expressing this or looking at this, I'd be really interested to hear it. Have a difference in the leading tone and the subtonic and the major key and the natural minor key because of the whole tone relationship, the whole step relationship. And the big deal about that is because of the role it plays on how it pulls to somewhere. And so we can't give it the same name because its relationship is fundamentally changed. And then our last one is Roman numerals, which are by far the most common way of analyzing things because they serve their purpose down here as numbers, so they're very straightforward. Only they can also express major and minor relationships, diminished relationships, and they can express all sorts of relationships. They can be used in combination with figure bass, which we'll talk about later, to get very specific. And so they're just great for the amount of detail that goes in, but you can also zoom them out and use them on a general level. There's a huge number of other options too, but they don't fall into the range for analyzing things, but they don't fall into the range of like using them in the context of a key or scale. For example, chord symbols are like a huge one. One other thing to note in the Arabic system, you may see, so because numbers can be used for like a whole bunch of things. You'll see numbers used for like all sorts of stuff. So you can put a little caret on top, a little hat. I couldn't quite figure out how to do it in MuseScore. I probably could have copy and pasted the character from Google into MuseScore, but I didn't go that crazy this time around. So anyways, sometimes you'll see a little caret on top, looks like a little hat. That means that they're specifically referring to the scale degree. It's a very deliberate scale degree analysis tool when they put that there. So that's that. It's not a huge deal. Honestly, I would go with these probably the most, the chord symbols. These you say out loud more than actually write down. So that's what's going on there. If you have any questions, let me know. Subscribe and have a blessed day.